Hello, welcome back to the channel and welcome to this video where we go from the forge and we are building the Adepta Sororitas Rhino. Now I must confess I have cheated a little bit. I've built the Rhino up to this point. It's a very standard vehicle. I would imagine most people watching the channel will have at least owned, if not built, several in your hobby lifetimes. So what I've done, I've sort of put the basic chassis together up to this stage. I've left the top panel off just in case for some crazy reason I decide I want to paint the inside. There is some detail in there, so I thought it would be not unreasonable to leave that off for now. And if I decide to paint it at a later stage, then I can just sort of pop that top panel off, paint the inside, and put the top back on again. I will be drilling these out before we get round to the painting. But to be quite honest, I can't be bothered this evening. I'm feeling slightly under the weather, but we'll see how we go. Now, what we get with the Rhino for the Adepta Sororitas is the standard old kit that's been around for donkey's years, and then we get an upgrade sprue. Now the upgrade sprue has got an absolute ton of stuff on it. This isn't all of it, this is just what I've chosen to be putting on my version. Sorry about that. Right, so I'm not going to mess about, we'll just crack straight on. So doors just fit in nicely in the both sides there. Now these doors are double-sided, so if you don't fancy painting that rather extensive inquisitorial sort of come sororitas symbol here, the chamber militant of the Ordo Hereticus. Then on the other side, you have a plain rhino door just with a bit of a fleur-de-lis and a spot on there for one of the order symbols, which we'll come to later. However, I like the detail, so I'm going to have the detailed side of the door on both sides. This is going to be a particularly fancy rhino. Not quite sure why it's going to be fancy, with the exception of the fact that I've called it Excelsior. There's nothing otherwise special about it. It's going to be carrying possibly even Sisters Repentia, which would probably suggest that it ought to be a bit of a knackered old rhino using transporting sisters like that, but never mind. Front panel is also different. We've got these sort of embellishments and a different sort of window port system to the standard kit. It doesn't have the opening visor that the basic kit does, but again, I'm not sure I've ever seen anyone actually use that sort of model that open even. I'm sure plenty of people have left it open, but I think it was more a case of most people just glue that shut in the same way as most people glue the back panel shut, which I'm not. However, I do think that's quite a nice little detail on there, and these little embellishments in the corner here are replicated in some pieces, which we'll see later on, which I'm not looking forward to gluing on. So the top panel on the basic kit comes with two options, sort of a pair of doors like that, which can obviously, with the hinges on them, be modelled as being open if you so choose. The Sororitas one comes with a nice big fleur-de-lis decoration on there, which I am looking forward to painting. Now, the question is, does it go on that way around, which is how they've put it on in the instructions, or does it go on this way around. Now I think most of the time on the table, you're going to be standing behind it, it's going to be facing forward. I want to see the fleur-de-lis that way around, rather than apparently upside down from my point of view as the player. So I'm going to put it on that way around. And if anyone tells me it's on upside down, I will tell them to go away, because it's my kit and I built it how I wanted it to, and it was a conscious decision. I'll be very polite about it. There we go. So, what else do we get in the box? What's in the box? Okay, so now we come to these fiddly details that I mentioned earlier. And this is what I'm talking about. So you can see it replicates in a similar way, the sort of the filigree detailing on the front there, but it's to go in that gap there. So what I'm going to do is literally, this is going to be glued on with a couple of dots of glue on the very, very thickest sort of parts of the back here. I can't see that this is going to need any more glue than that, and by having more glue on, obviously the more glue you put on, the more risk you run of it blobbing where you don't want it on the model. So I think that looks about right for what I want. So now I just need to find the matching piece to go on the back. And because of how I do these videos, I've clipped everything off the frame. And as such, I don't know which piece is which anymore. Because on this occasion I didn't go to the extent of numbering all the pieces in separate little bags, mainly because I'm in more of a hurry with this build than I have been with sort of other From the Forge videos when I've done sort of the Gladiator and so on, mainly because those weren't sort of as part of any particular project that I was trying to get done on a deadline. And also because on the whole you don't need the numbering most of the time. The parts are pretty obvious as to what they are. So we've done that now for that side. Let's do the other side, and that is the trickiest part of this build. Finished, I hope. Because whilst I've built many Rhinos chassis over the time, in my time in the hobby, I've never done this one before. This one being the Sororitas one, not this specific kit, that would be too obvious. Right, okay. Again, just some little drops of glue. I mean, I'm probably still overkilling the glue by some way here in terms of what you would actually need to hold these pieces on. However, I think that looks pretty smart. And it wasn't too difficult in the end. I must admit that was a part that I was nervous about doing, even with as many years of building kits as I've got. However, it went pretty smoothly. Now, this is possibly my favourite piece in the whole upgrade sprue, is a sword sort of strapped onto the Rhino. Now the instructions would have you put it sort of about here on the top. And thinking about what I'm going to be doing with the hatches here, we're going to have the Hunter Killer Missile this side, and we're going to have a Battle Sister on this side manning a Storm Bolter. So let's build her first, because then I can put her on and we can see exactly where she sits on the back of the kit, and then I can decide where I want that sword, because I think what I want to do is to have that sword within her reach from the cupola that she's sitting in, so that if anyone sort of is mobbing this rhino to the extent of sort of climbing on the top of it, I think the sister manning the guns would probably want to have a sword in reach. And as such, I think I want her, or I want to be able to put that piece close enough to her that she can reach it from where she's going to be. So, put her backpack on, and at the same time I'll prep the cupola to take the base that she's sitting on. Now ordinarily I would suggest you do that as two parts separately, but as I say, I'm keen to be getting on with this, A, because I'd quite like to go to bed before 2 o'clock tomorrow morning, and B, because I want to get clipping the Exorcist and Immolator off the frames for the next videos. So there she sits. Now, I think that handle there would be within perfect reach of someone in that cupola. She's just got to lean over, draw the sword, and start hacking about her. And this is why I would always suggest it pays to think about your builds before you actually sort of glue them or glue anything down. Because I mean, sort of aesthetics wise, you'd probably say you put the sword somewhere in the middle of the kit there. And in fact, if I can show you the instructions, hope I'm not breaking any trademarks by doing this or copyrights. Here you can see that's exactly where they're suggesting that you put it. But I think it makes more practical sense a bit further forward. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, next thing we have is a little reliquary at the back. And again, the instructions suggest you just pop this at the back, sort of somewhere like that, which is interesting because actually where they're suggesting that you put it is off center. I don't know if you can see, but there's two little rivets there, and they are not centrally located, or not sort of symmetrical around the center line of that tank. So I think what I might do, because this is sort of a little reliquary and effectively like a sort of a shrine, one of the other upgrade pieces which doesn't have a space or a designated spot, there are a whole host of things that you can pop on these rhinos that sort of don't have a dedicated space. And one of the pieces which I particularly like is this little batch of candles here. So I think what I'm going to do is also make this little reliquary a bit of a shrine if I can. So we'll have the reliquary at the back, and then we'll have some candles next to it, so that these sisters have got sort of a little mobile shrine to the Emperor or one of the saints and no matter where they go in their rhino, they can always just stop, kneel down and light a votive candle before they go into battle, which strikes me as a very Adepta Sororitas sort of thing to do. So assuming my fingers aren't too fat, there we go. We'll pop those candles just next to it there. There we go. I think that's pretty cool. So, we've got the rest of the sister herself to put together. So let's get her head on. And I'm just going to have her looking straight forward, I think, because the storm bolter that she's about to be gripping is also going to be facing forward. And whilst it's great to have sort of the movement and the ability to sort of look left or right with the kit, the downside to that is that you sort of almost have to turn around to be then looking towards whatever it is you're wanting it to shoot at. Otherwise it looks a bit weird. And so actually by having her looking in the direction that the gun is pointing, I can actually just leave that top plate on. That sort of cupola that she's in, I can just leave that unglued, and then she can that can rotate, and she can look wherever she wants in the game. And just a little bit of glue in there. So make sure that's in the right spot. We'll just give it a few moments for that glue to take hold. You see she can sort of rotate. I mean, because I've left this top panel off, what I can potentially do would be to magnetise the bottom if I felt the need. I don't think I need to go that far, if I'm quite honest. So the next part is going to be attaching her arms. So, if I can focus, there's a little hole in there in her shoulder. That's where that double glue is going. And then the other is just going into this little channel. And that one spot of glue in there will be enough for both fittings, I would imagine. So let's get that one in. And then we'll do the other one. Just get something under there to lift that arm up. And then you can just see the glue take. So there we go, we have one sister on top. Now the other thing that we'll need doing is the hatch doors, because if you don't put the hatch doors on, it looks a bit weird, because all of a sudden you've got a big gaping hole in the top of your tank and no way of stopping people just chucking stuff in or even keeping the rain out. So we'll glue those on. However, I'm going to paint first, then I'll stick those on, because if I don't, then getting a paintbrush in there to paint her arms and sleeves is going to be tricky. So we'll put those to one side, and we'll actually put her to one side as well for now. Next up is the Hunter-Killer Missile. Beautiful piece, this, sort of ornate in the way that only the sisters stuff is at the moment. I would imagine if Custodes got proper rhinos, they'd have very grand HK missile launchers on theirs. I know they do get access to rhinos, but it's just the basic kit as far as I can tell. I've never actually seen anyone. I know actually the Custodes I don't think do take rhinos, do they? It's the Sisters of Silence that fight alongside them that use the rhinos. But nevertheless, if Custodes used rhinos, I would expect them to be very fancy. And you can also choose with this kit whether or not you have fired the HK missile, because the actual shell itself, or the missile tip, comes separate. So you can leave it off, and for however many turns of the game after you fire the missile, it will look right. Or you can put it on for however many turns before you fire the missile, it will look right. Or you could magnetise it if you were really desperate and make it look right all the time. I'm not going to waste a magnet on that. So, targeter with obligatory skull. That plugs into the side of the HK. Like that. And then this big hole in the side accepts that plug there. Like that. So now you can see which way around that goes. Now we know which way around this goes on the tank. Which, in case you were wondering, this little bit is some kind of video sort of or screen. So actually that always points forwards. Just as a little bit of a hint. Like a scanner or a scope of some kind. And then we can pop that in there. Now again, that can certainly be either magnetised or glued in or left off. I think, to be honest, on this occasion, I'm going to glue this one. Sub-assemblies are great. However, there comes a point when you have too many things to paint that are separate, and it can make things like shading and what have you a bit trickier. So we'll stick that one in for now. I say for now, that's permanent now. And then we are on to smoke launchers, tow hooks, and decorations. So let's start with the smoke launchers. Pretty bog standard for rhinos or imperial vehicles. Standard sort of design. Being a Sororitas one, of course, it's got the fleur-de-lis and some trim. That'll be fun painting later. Not. Now, the interesting thing is that Games Workshop always have their smoke launchers pointing like that. If you ever look at smoke launchers on actual fighting vehicles, what they tend to do is be a bit more like, well, slightly more forward, a bit more like that. But they don't really leave you with anywhere on said vehicles to put them at that sort of angle. So I think these are just going to go on top of the headlights, unfortunately. The instructions would have you put them slightly further back between these two raised parts here, but obviously my sword handle's there, so I can't do that. So instead, I'm just going to put tiny double glue on there, and I'll just have it like that, facing forward. And Bob, as they say, is your uncle. Which is interesting because my godfather was called Uncle Bob. So it very much is the case for me. Wasn't actually my uncle. It was my mum's cousin's husband. However, we always called him Uncle Bob. So, next up we have the little tow hooks that go in the front here. And again, because this Sororitas fleur-de-lis, or fleur-de-lis, is probably the correct pronunciation. So just a dot of glue on the flat panel at the back. These are actually weirdly angled slightly forwards. Not quite sure why. The intention is for the hook on the tow hook to be swinging forwards, but never mind, it is. So we are left with various sort of decorations. And we've got a load of sort of scrolls, some reliquaries, some purity seals. Now, all I'm going to make sure is that when I stick this on, if I can actually hold it, what I want is those hangers to be below the front line of the exhaust. Because if they're above it, I think they'll look a bit weird. And looking at the painted version in the instructions, they've made sure they're below as well. So I think that's probably a sensible life choice. Just have that hanging down there. I mean, the sort of the scientific part of me wants to say that putting, you know, parchment scrolls near the hot engine exhaust isn't the most sensible life choice for the occupants of the Rhino. However, sisters do tend to sort of seem to like their fire. There are lots of sort of burning braziers and braziers, that is, not braziers, in their sort of iconography. And so I'm not sure they'd be entirely bothered if these parchments caught fire during a battle. Hopefully, whatever's written on them doesn't need to be seen and read in order to be effective. Or I suppose being the 41st millennium, it could be written on something that's non-flammable, that just happens to look like parchment. Maybe it's scribed on the flayed skin of the dead psychers that feed the Emperor on a daily basis. Sorry, that was a bit macabre, wasn't it? Right, where are we now? Okay. Couple of reliquaries, I think. Let's choose ones that look a bit similar to go on the front. Try and get that in the middle of that panel. And straight. Now you get 4 of these in the kit. 3 of them are the same shape, and then there's one different. And that drives my OCD mad. You also get this open book, which I quite like, and I think I'm going to put it there, right front and centre. Not quite sure why there's so much decoration on the back of it, given that you've basically got to glue it here. Not quite sure how you could have it open. I can't see any pictures of it actually being on the model at any point. But I think it looks quite cool there. Then we're on to some more relics, some purity seals, and a few sort of shields and rosettes and things. So what are we going to put where? I think we'll have this, which I think is technically the Order of the Bloody Rose, but my order is the Order of the Golden Thorn, and therefore I am using Bloody Rose as sort of the founding principles of my order. So I'll use their sort of order tactics, chapter tactics, whatever they call it for sisters, and so I quite like the idea of using some of their sort of iconography as well. I think that's the sort of thing that sisters would definitely do. So let's put these other reliquaries on as well. I mean, you don't have to put all of this stuff on. You know, if you want to keep your rhinos sort of a bit more basic, in terms of their appearance. Obviously you can leave the sort of the filigree work off. That is essentially optional, as are all of these later pieces that I'm attaching to mine. The main question is where to put stuff, because we've got this wonderful piece here which is a rose, which I really want to have on here. So I think what I'm going to do is put it by one of the doors on the side, probably here. And so as the sisters disembark, they can sort of touch their hand to that as they get out of the rhino and sort of, I don't know, touch it for good luck, something like that. A bit like football players kissing the grass when they come onto the pitch. So then the last of the reliquaries, sorry, you got a close up the back of my hand then, didn't you? Right. Last one on that side. Where do we put this? There's a nice little shield as well, which I'm going to put on the opposite side to that rose symbol. So this will be sort of perform a similar sort of purpose, if you like, to those sisters getting outside or getting out of the rhino on this side of the tank. And then there's a bigger version of that shield, which I'm going to put on the back door. Just like that. Now we've got some fairly funky sort of purity seals as well. So I think we'll have, one is recommended just here. I say recommended. I don't think it's technically quite as formal as that, but the instructions do put one there, so it's sort of not a bad spot for something. Just make sure the Inquisition symbol is upright on it. Don't want to be turned into a servitor. On the basis of shoddy workmanship. Right, and I think we'll have this one at the side of that rear door. So again, just sort of adding a bit to this shrine at the back, really. Got to make sure it doesn't impede the door from opening. Because again, don't want to be a servitor. Cool. So we have got a few other little purity seals, but I don't think, in all honesty, I'm going to bother with them. I don't think they'll add all that much. And I've got sort of 4 reliquaries on the Rhino already. So there we have it. We have one completed, built Adepta Sororitas Rhino. Just as a final point, don't glue that door flat, because when you glue it flat, it bangs on the hunter killer missile next door. So you need to glue it at a jaunty angle, just to make sure that it sort of doesn't impede too much on the rotation of that part. You see what I mean there? And with that last piece of advice, I will leave you for this evening. Join me on the next video when we'll be probably looking at either some infantry or one of the bigger tanks. Could be the Emulator, could be the Exorcist, or it could be some Sacrosancts, or I don't know. I'll see how I feel at the time. But until then, keep smiling, keep hobbying, and look after yourselves. Bye.